Hey everyone, this is Jimin. Before we start, I want to know where you're listening from. Drop your country in the comments below. I never thought I'd speak these words, not out loud, not after everything that's happened. But I'm learning that silence doesn't protect you, it only delays the reckoning. And I think I've delayed mine for far too long. You see, I've carried something in my chest for years now, a weight I couldn't name, a memory I tried to bury beneath concerts and comebacks and the flashing lights of 1,000 cameras. But memory doesn't die quietly, it waits. And then when you least expect it, it rises like fire. And that's why I'm here. This isn't a scandal. It's not a confession made for drama or views. It's just the truth, my truth. And I hope that in sharing it, someone out there will feel less alone in their own confusion, in their own fear, in their own love. It started on a day that felt too ordinary to carry so much meaning. We had just wrapped rehearsal. It was sweaty, loud, chaotic the usual. Hoseok was joking around in the corner. Yoongi had already disappeared into whatever secret quiet room he escapes to after practice, and Taehyung was playing some bizarre vocal filter through the studio speaker, laughing like a child. I remember Jin throwing a towel at him, yelling something about destroying his hearing. And then there was Jungkook, standing against the mirror watching me, not in a weird way, or at least I didn't think so at the time, just watching intently, like he was trying to read something only he could see. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was just tired, that he wasn't actually watching me the way my body was starting to feel it. But the next day he did it again. And the day after that, until it became a part of my routine, wake up, eat, rehearse, pretend not to notice that Jungkook was looking at me like I was holding a secret he was desperate to steal. The moment I'll never forget happened in Busan. We were staying at this hotel that overlooked the ocean. There's something about being near water that always makes me feel more vulnerable, like the waves are daring me to reveal something I've kept hidden. That night, after our schedule ended, we all split into our rooms, but I couldn't sleep. Something in me was unsettled, restless. I went to the balcony just to breathe, and 5 minutes later, I heard a knock. It was Jungkook. He didn't say anything at first, just stepped in, barefoot, hair damp from a shower, wearing that oversized white shirt he always travels with. He walked straight to the railing and leaned over it, looking out into the night. I stayed silent. I didn't know what he wanted, and I wasn't sure I wanted to find out. But then he said something I'll never forget. Why do you always hide yourself, Hing? I remember blinking, thinking he meant emotionally. I gave him some half answer about how I'd always been that way. But he turned and looked at me, and his eyes dropped to my chest. That's when I realized he wasn't talking about my heart. You're always wearing oversized shirts, layers. You act like your body is something shameful. I froze. My skin went cold. Because how do you respond to something like that? How do you respond when someone sees through every defense you've spent years building? I'm not ashamed, I said, but my voice cracked, and I knew he heard it. Then he stepped closer, too close, and in a whisper that felt like thunder, he said, "Then show me." I couldn't breathe. I laughed nervous, awkward, like a child caught stealing. Jungkook, What are you talking about? But he didn't laugh. He didn't move. He just kept staring. And then, with a gentleness I didn't expect, he reached out and placed his hand on the hem of my shirt. I'm not going to force you, he said, but if you're not ashamed, then don't hide. I should have walked away. I should have told him he was being inappropriate or weird or crossing a line. But instead, I stood there, frozen, trembling, and slowly I lifted my shirt. It wasn't a striptease, it wasn't sexy, it was vulnerable, raw. My chest, with all its imperfections, its scars, its softness, exposed under the moonlight. And Jungkook, he didn't laugh, he didn't smirk, he didn't reach for me like I feared he would. Instead, he looked, and then he whispered, "You're beautiful." I didn't cry, not then. But something inside me shattered. We never talked about it again. At least, not for a long time. The next morning, he was back to being Jungkook goofy, loud, wrestling with Namjoon in the hallway over some protein bar. I told myself it didn't mean anything, that maybe I'd imagined it, that maybe he was just being a friend, but something had changed in him, in me, in the space between us. And that change started to haunt me. Suddenly, rehearsals felt different. Every time he brushed past me, my body flinched not from fear, but from recognition. My shirts got bigger, my layers thicker. I started avoiding him in subtle ways, arriving late, leaving early, choosing seats across the room. Namjoon noticed first. "You and Jungkook," he said one day during a rare moment alone. "You're not okay." I shrugged. "We're fine." But he gave me that look, the one only leaders know how to give, the one that says, "You don't have to lie to me. Just don't let it eat you alive," he said. And maybe I already was, because the truth is, I didn't know what I was feeling. Was it attraction, shame, fear, all of them? I'd spent so much of my life trying to be what the world wanted me to be, soft, sweet, angelic Jimin, that I didn't know who I was when those masks slipped. I started journaling, writing things I couldn't say out loud, pages and pages of confusion, and Jungkook was everywhere in them. Do you know what it's like to be terrified of your own thoughts? To see someone every day and not know if you want to run to them or run from them? To be afraid that one wrong move will destroy everything you've built? Because BTS wasn't just a group, it was my life, my home, my brothers. I couldn't risk that. I wouldn't. But hearts don't obey logic, and mine had started to drift. I remember the night Jin sat beside me during dinner and asked, "Are you okay?" I nodded. "Too fast, too fake. You're not eating. You haven't been sleeping. You're scared of something." He always had that scary way of knowing too much. "It's nothing," I whispered, and he said, "Then why does it feel like you're disappearing?" That night, I stood in front of my mirror and looked at myself shirtless for the first time in weeks. I didn't see a body. I saw fear. Fear of being seen, fear of being loved, fear of wanting the wrong things. But I also saw a spark, the tiniest flicker of something else, something that looked like hope. And that terrified me even more because if I let myself believe that Jungkook meant what he said, if I let myself imagine a world where I wasn't ashamed. If I let myself hope, then what? What did that mean for everything else? For our group? For our future? For my sanity? I needed to know. Not from assumptions, not from stares, from him. And so one night, weeks later, I knocked on his door. He opened it, shirtless, hair messy, eyes tired. Hyung, I need to ask you something, I said. And before I could stop myself, the words fell out. When you said I was beautiful, did you mean it? He didn't blink, didn't hesitate. Yes. Why? Because you are. That's not an answer. He stepped back. Let me in. Close the door. Do you remember that night? He asked. I nodded. I couldn't sleep for days after that, he said. I kept wondering if I crossed the line, if I'd ruined everything. You didn't, I whispered. He sat on the edge of his bed, looked up at me like a boy caught in the middle of a confession he never wanted to make. I said it because it was true, because I meant it, because I'd been seeing you for years and never had the courage to say what I really felt. I sat down beside him. What do you feel? And he said, that you're the bravest person I know, that you carry the weight of the world on your back and still smile for everyone else, that your body, your heart, they're not something to be hidden, they're sacred. And that was the night I cried, not because I was sad, but because for the first time I felt seen. And that was just the beginning, because what came next was everything I never expected. There's something haunting about silence between two people who know what they've done can never be undone. That's what I remember most after that night. Not the words we said, not even the way our bodies trembled near each other, but the silence that followed. The silence in hallways, the silence in vans, the silence between glances that held too much and mouths that held back too long. It wasn't cold, it wasn't cruel, it was sacred, fragile. Like if we said the wrong thing too soon, everything would shatter. For the next few days, Jungkook and I moved around each other like shadows, soft, careful, honest in everything but our words. And yet somehow the rest of the members felt it. I think Hosok knew even before I did. The way he smiled at us half tilted, eyes squinting like he was watching a secret unfold in front of him. He never said anything, but his silence was permission. Yoongi, on the other hand, was different. Sharp, intuitive in the most uncomfortable ways. I remember the night we stayed late at the studio, just the two of us. I was trying to finish a vocal harmony for a demo that never made it out of the vault. He sat across from me, headphones half off, eyes staring straight through me. Is this about Jungkook? I froze. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, tone flat. You're not subtle, Jimin. You never were. I tried to brush it off. I tried to say it was nothing, that we were just close. But he stopped me with one sentence that gutted me more than I expected. Don't lose yourself trying to carry someone else's feelings. I didn't know what that meant at the time, but I never forgot it. And now, looking back, I understand. I was already drowning in feelings I hadn't named: fear, desire, guilt, hope, and Jungkook's presence only made the water deeper. Every look from him felt like a wave, every laugh a ripple across my skin. And yet I wasn't running. I think that's what surprised me the most. Um, I've run from things before: pressure, pain, expectations, my own reflection. But with him, something in me stayed rooted, even as everything else in me wanted to escape. Because deep down, I knew he wasn't trying to hurt me. He wasn't trying to expose me. He was trying to see me. And when someone wants to see you that badly, part of you wants to be seen. Still, nothing about it was simple. We had interviews to shoot, songs to record, dance practices that left our bodies aching and our minds too tired to think. But even in the chaos, I felt it, a thread connecting us, invisible to the world but burning under my skin. Then came Tokyo. It was supposed to be another quick stop show, fan signs, sleep, fly out. But the hotel room they gave me had a balcony that overlooked the entire city, and something about that view made it impossible to rest. I called him. I don't know why. He just, still, can you come over? I asked. He was there 5 minutes later. No questions. We didn't talk much, just sat on the balcony, watching the lights. I think we both knew something was coming, something inevitable, something we'd both avoided naming for far too long. You're quiet, he said. I nodded. He waited, and then I whispered, I don't know what this is. He didn't respond right away, just stared out into the city, the glow reflecting in his eyes. It's whatever we are willing to let it be, he finally said. I turned to him. A mistake? He shook his head. A truth. And that's when I kissed him. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't perfect. My lips trembled. His hand hesitated on my jaw. We were both unsure, both fragile. But in that moment, nothing else existed. No cameras, no fans, no headlines, just us, breathing, breaking, becoming. We didn't sleep that night, not in the way people think. We just laid there, side by side, my head on his chest, his fingers tracing patterns on my arm, both of us too scared to speak. Does this change everything? I asked. He paused. Only if we let it. The next morning, we were back in our idol skins, smiling, waving, saying all the right things. But beneath it all, we were something new. And it terrified me because love is not just joy, it's responsibility, it's risk. It's waking up every day knowing someone else holds a part of your heart and trusting they won't break it. And I wasn't sure if I was ready. The days that followed were a blur: promotions, choreography, award shows. But every night, without fail, I'd feel his gaze from across the room. Not possessive, not demanding, just present, like an anchor. And still, I didn't tell the others. I couldn't. Not yet, until taehyung cornered me. We were backstage at a music show. I was fixing my mic. He came up behind me, leaned in close, and whispered, he looks at you like you're the answer to a question he's been asking his whole life. I turned, heart pounding. Who? Don't play dumb. I tried to deflect, laugh it off, but Taehyung wasn't buying it. Just be careful, he said. He's soft inside, even if he acts tough. I wanted to say, so am I. But the words got stuck. That night, I told Jungkook we needed to slow down. He nodded. But I saw it in his eyes, the flicker of hurt, the shadow of doubt. Did I do something wrong? No, I said quickly. It's me. I'm scared. He didn't try to convince me otherwise. He didn't beg. He just held my hand and said, I'll wait. And he did. For weeks, we went back to being just members, just brothers, just two voices in a 7-part harmony. But beneath the surface, the tension was unbearable. I'd hear his voice on a demo and feel my chest tighten. I'd see him dancing in the mirror and have to look away. I'd sit beside him during interviews and pray the mics couldn't hear my heartbeat. It was Yoongi again who broke the silence. We were on a late night walk in LA, just the two of us, the city buzzing quietly around us. You look like a man who swallowed a secret too big to digest. I sighed. Maybe I have. He lit a cigarette, took a drag, exhaled. You love him? I didn't answer. That's not a crime, you know. It might be, I whispered. Only if you let it. That's when it hit me. All my life, I've been taught to shrink, to soften my edges, to apologize for wanting too much. But here was someone who knew every inch of me asking me to stop hiding. And so I made a decision. I walked into Jungkook's room that night. He was on the floor, headphones on, sketching something in a notebook. I sat beside him, took the pen from his hand, wrote 3 words on the page. I'm not scared. He looked at me, eyes wide, hopeful, terrified. And then he put me in. This time, the case was different, certain, alive. We didn't stop, we didn't apologize, we just existed in each other's arms, in a world we carved out with our own hands. But nothing stays secret forever. The first person to find out was Jin. He walked in on us, half asleep, on the couch in the green room. My head on Jungkook's shoulder, his fingers tangled in mine. He froze. We froze. For a second, no one breathed. Then he smiled. Finally, he said, Took you long enough. I expected anger, judgment. Instead, he gave us grace. I don't care who you love, he said. As long as you love fully. Namjoon was next. Then Hobby, then Taehyung, then Yoongi. And one by one, they gave us the same thing. Support, new questions, new ultimatums, just love. Because that's what BTS was always built on. Not just music, not just fame, but brotherhood. Real, messy, beautiful brotherhood. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. Not because I had someone to hold, but because I was no longer hiding. And that freedom, it changed everything. But it also came with a cost because the world outside our circle wasn't always as kind. And soon we'd have to face it together. I thought the hardest part would be telling the members. I thought once the hurdle was crossed, the rest would fall into place like some quiet miracle, like love once whispered aloud could protect itself. But I was wrong. The truth is, the world doesn't stop spinning just because your heart has finally found its rhythm. After Jin found out, after Namjoon nodded with a sigh that felt like both relief and acceptance, after Taehyung whispered, I'm proud of you, like he meant every syllable, I allowed myself to exhale for the first time in what felt like years. We were still us, still Seven, still BTS. But under that security, a question began to grow. What happens when the world finds out? We weren't just two people in love. We were public figures, symbols, expectations carved into skin and stage lights. Every move we made was watched, dissected, interpreted, and somewhere in that machinery, our hearts were at risk of being broken open and sold. It started small, a blurry photo in the background of someone else's Instagram live me, leaning against Jungkook, his hand resting on my thigh. Armies noticed. Of course they did, they always do. Is this a couple moment? Look at the body language. Do you think it's real? And at first, it was cute, flattering, even. We laughed about it. Hobie teased us mercilessly. You two are terrible at being subtle, he'd say, grinning over his iced coffee. But the comments started to change. He's distracting Jungkook from his potential. Jimin is manipulating him. This will destroy BTS. And suddenly, we weren't lovers anymore. We were liabilities. Jungkook wanted to protect me. He always has this instinct to shield, to defend, to place himself between the people he loves and the pain of the world. But what do you do when the pain isn't a bullet you can block? When it's a million whispers digging into your skin? I told him we needed to cool off publicly, pull back, stop giving them fuel, and he agreed. But I could see it in his eyes. It broke him a little. The thing no one tells you about love is that it requires constant translation, not just between languages, but between fears, between traumas, between timelines that don't always align. Jungkook laughed out loud. I loved in silence. And somewhere between his fireworks and my shadows, we lost each other for a while. There was a show in Osaka that I'll never forget. We were performing Black Swan, and there's this moment, the one where I spin and reach for him, and he's supposed to catch me, steady me, anchor me. But that night, he hesitated, just a bit, just enough, and I stumbled. The crowd didn't notice, but I did, and so did they. After the show, we didn't speak. The van ride was quiet, the hotel hallways colder than they'd ever felt. I went to my room, closed the door, and stared at myself in the mirror for what felt like hours. Was this the prize? Was this the cost of being known? The next morning, he knocked. I didn't open. He knocked again, softer. Hyung, he said, please. I opened the door. He looked like he hadn't slept. I'm sorry, he said, and I broke, not into anger, into sobs, not because he missed a beat, but because I realized how hard we were both trying not to hurt anyone and still failing. I don't know how to love you in secret, he whispered. I didn't answer because I didn't know how to love him in the light. That night, we slept in the same bed but with our backs to each other. And that silence, not the sacred one, not the tender one, this was different. This was a silence of walls rising again, of fear reclaiming the space we'd carved for joy. The next day, Namjoon called a meeting. Just the seven of us, no staff, no managers, no masks. He sat us down and said, we can't move forward if two of us are stuck behind something unspoken. My throat tightened. Jungkook looked down, and then Namjoon said something I didn't expect. We are not idols first. We are brothers. And if you're going to walk this path, you walk it together with us. No threat, no pressure, just support. And I cried again. I don't know when I started crying so much. Maybe it's because for so long I didn't allow myself to. Maybe it's because love, real love, demands release. That night, for the first time in weeks, Jungkook and I walked through the city together. No disguises, no hats, no hoodies, just us. Fingers grazing, but not quite touching. Hearts exposed. I don't want to hide anymore, he said. Neither do I. But I know we didn't make a plan. We didn't write a press release or prepare for damage control. We just kept walking. And somehow that walk became our revolution. The months that followed were a blur of comebacks, fan signs, award shows, but something had changed, not in the choreography, not in the vocals in us, in the way I looked at him, in the way he looked at me, in the way we chose to live in the spaces in between. Sometimes he'd sneak glances during interviews, little smirks that only I could read. Sometimes I'd steal his hoodie and wear it to rehearsal just to feel safe. Sometimes our hands would touch backstage just briefly, just enough. And little by little, the fear loosened its grip. Yoongi started writing lyrics that felt too close to our story. Jin kept calling us the old married couple. Taehyung started taking photos of us when we weren't looking and sending them to the group chat with captions like "get a room." And I think that's what saved us, not just love, but community. Because love alone isn't enough. It needs context. It needs soil. It needs brothers who will catch you when you fall. Even if you stumble over feelings no one prepared you for. But still, the outside world hovered. There were rumors, fan edits, conspiracies, articles with headlines that twisted our silence into suspicion. One night, I found Jungkook sitting alone in the practice room, lights off, just his playlist echoing through the space. He didn't hear me come in. I sat beside him. Do you regret it? I asked. He looked at me like I'd said something cruel. No, he said. Do you? And without thinking, I kissed him. Not to be romantic, not to be poetic, but to anchor us again. Because sometimes touch is the only language that can reach through doubt. He held my face in his hands and whispered, then we don't stop. And we didn't. Not when the rumors got louder. Not when the pressure tightened. Not when management asked us gently, strategically to cool it down for the image. We didn't stop. We adjusted. We became fluid in quiet defiance, subtle rebellion, private vows. There was a night after our anniversary dinner when we stood on the rooftop of the Hay building. Just us, the city humming below. I would give it all up, he said, if they asked me to choose between you and this. And I shook my head. No, you don't have to choose. We just have to keep choosing each other every day, no matter what the world says. That's what love became. Not a spectacle, not a confession, a choice, daily, difficult, deliberate. And in that choice, I found myself not the idol, not the brand. The boy from Busan who once thought he was only lovable if he stayed small, soft, silent. Jungkook shattered that lie. Every day he showed me a mirror I was too scared to look into alone. He made me lift my shirt, literally, metaphorically, and face the body, the scars, the story beneath. And I'm still lifting it, still learning, still choosing, because um, love isn't a single act. It's a series of decisions in the face of fear. And I choose him again and again and again. There's a moment I go back to often, though I rarely talk about it. It wasn't a concert or an award show or even one of those iconic behind the scenes moments we armies love to rewatch years later. It was just a simple morning in Tokyo. No schedule, no cameras, just the sun spilling through the curtains and the weight of Jungkook's arm draped over my chest like it belonged there. And in that silence, I remember thinking, this is what peace feels like. Not the kind of peace that comes from rest, the kind of peace that comes from being seen, from knowing that no matter how many people are screaming your name outside, the person next to you knows who you really are and stays. But the world doesn't always allow that peace to last, especially not for people like us. We'd always been good at protecting each other. When Jungkook struggled as the maknae, I was the one who shielded him from pressure. When I fell into self-doubt, he was the first to grab my wrist and pull me out of the fog. Our bond didn't begin with romance. It began with survival, with choosing each other over and over again in a world that often made us feel disposable. So, when things started to shift, when what we had moved from comfort to something heavier, something deeper, we were scared, not because we didn't trust each other, but because we weren't sure if the world could handle us. There was one night in the middle of our Love Yourself tour when I almost walked away from everything. I had just finished a phone call with someone from the label. I won't say who, but the message was clear. Whatever's happening between you two, you need to fix it fast. Fix it, they said, as if love is a malfunction, as if being human is a flaw in the system. I hung up and sat on the floor of the hotel bathroom, knees pulled to my chest, fists pressed to my eyes, trying to keep the tears inside like they could somehow make me stronger. But strength doesn't come from silence, it comes from surrender. Jungkook found me there an hour later. He didn't ask question. He just sat beside me. And eventually I said it, the thing I'd been afraid to admit. I don't think I'm strong enough for this. And he answered, then let me be strong for both of us. Sometimes I wonder if people really understand what that means to carry someone's heart while also protecting their name. To wake up every day knowing that the person you love might also be the reason the world turns its back on you. That's a love not everyone's willing to choose. But he did every day, even when it cost him sleep, peace, sanity. I remember one fight we had, not a big one, just the kind that comes when you're both exhausted and raw and too full of feelings you haven't named yet. We were in New York. It was raining. He wanted to walk outside, clear his head. I said something sharp. I don't even remember what, but I'll never forget the look on his face. Not anger, not hurt, just disappointment. I can take the world hating me, he said, but not you. And that broke me. Because the truth is, um, I had spent so much time protecting myself that I didn't realize I was hurting him in the process. That night, I wrote him a letter, the kind no one will ever see. 8 pages, front and back. Every line a confession, every sentence a piece of myself I hadn't yet given him. I slipped it under his door. The next morning, he didn't say anything. He just hugged me. Longer than usual, tighter than usual, and whispered, I'm still here. That's what love became for us. Not declarations, not drama, but daily presence. Still here, still choosing, still holding on even when it hurt. But we couldn't stay hidden forever. Not when the rumors turned to headlines. Not when our private lives became public speculation. There was a photo. It wasn't even explicit, just us leaving a cafe in Seoul, my hand resting on his back, his head tilted toward mine, like we were telling a joke no one else would understand. But the caption, BTS members caught in secret relationship, it exploded. Forums, reactions, fan edits, hate. They tore us apart in comments. They romanticized us in threads. They called us liars, traitors, heroes, icons. And through it all, we said nothing. Because what do you say when the world has decided your story for you? You breathe, you center, you survive. But that silence began to crack something inside me. I'd walk past him in the hallway and ache to reach for his hand. I'd hear his laugh across the room and bite my tongue just to keep from smiling too wide. I missed him, even when he was right beside me. So one night, I told him, I miss you, I said. His eyes filled with tears. You're right here, he whispered. No, I said, not like before. We stood there in the middle of our shared dressing room, surrounded by makeup and costumes and the echoes of 1,000 performances. And in that moment, we were just two boys trying to find their way back to each other. He held my face in his hands and said, then let's stop hiding. And I said, even if it costs us everything? And he answered, then at least we'll know it was real. That's the thing about love, the real kind. It doesn't come with guarantees. It comes with choices. And that night, we chose honesty, not for the world, for us. We didn't post a statement. We didn't hold a press conference. We just stopped shrinking. We started sitting next to each other again. We let our eyes linger during interviews. We laughed a little louder when the other made a joke. And the world noticed not all of it was kind, but some of it was beautiful messages from fans, real fans who said things like, I don't know what's going on, but you both, or whatever they are to each other, you can tell it's love. And those comments became lifelines, tiny pieces of hope, proof that maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't as cruel as we feared. Still, not everyone was ready. There were meetings, discussions, words like brand and image and demographic stability. But we listened. Then we walked out of the room hand in hand because We spent too long pretending our love was a liability. It wasn't. It was our anchor. And for the first time, we weren't going to apologize for it. I remember telling Jin about the decision. He nodded, then hugged me like a parent sending their kid off to college. You'll be okay, he said. Even if you're not, we'll make sure you get back on your feet. That's the thing about family. They don't just celebrate your victories, they catch your fall. And BTS, whatever the world says about us, has always been a family. Even when we are scared, even when we disagree, even when we don't have the answers, we hold each other. And that's what saved us. Not the fans, not the industry, each other. And every time I wake up with Jungkook breathing soft against my neck, I'm reminded of that. Love doesn't need the world's permission. It just needs courage. And every day we choose it together. You know what they never prepare you for? The aftermath of honesty. Everyone talks about the courage it takes to tell the truth, to stand in your skin without armor. But no one talks about the hours that come after. The stillness, the echo, the quiet terror of wondering whether the ground you just stepped onto is solid or quicksand. When Jungkook and I stopped hiding, we thought that would be the storm. That being seen would be the hardest part. But what came after was more subtle, more exhausting. It was the way staff members started talking in smaller circles, the way wardrobe assistants avoided eye contact, the way certain executives addressed us only as a unit, like we were now some shared liability. It wasn't hate, it wasn't violence, it was cold. A kind of chill that sets into your bones and makes you second guess your place in every room you walk into. And still, I never regretted it because what's the point of warmth if it's built on lies? We were in New York for a press event. The schedule was tight, the energy chaotic. But there was a moment, just one, that reminded me why we chose all of this. We were standing behind a curtain, seconds away from walking onto stage. The crowd on the other side was roaring. Microphones were being adjusted. Makeup artists were doing last second touch ups. And Jungkook leaned in, barely above a whisper, and said, I love you. Not performative, not loud, just true. I didn't say it back. Not because I didn't feel it, but because that moment, those three words needed to exist in the air untouched, undiluted. And later that night, when we were lying in our hotel room, him scrolling through fan edits and me nursing my sore knees with an ice pack, I turned to him and said, I love you too. His smile in that moment, God, I wish the world could have seen it. Not because I wanted to prove anything, but because everyone deserves to be looked at like that at least once in their life. But love doesn't cancel reality. And reality showed up in waves. There was a magazine shoot we were both scheduled for, a high profile one, global circulation. We'd done these kinds of things 100 times before. But this time, the energy was different. The stylist came in with a rack of outfits and said, we want something masculine for Jungkook and something soft for Jimin. It wasn't just the words. It was the implication, like my softness was now something to be weaponized, something to be molded for their agenda. Jungkook's jaw clenched. He didn't say anything. Not then. But when we got back to the dressing room, he slammed the door and said, "Why do they always try to split us into categories?" And I didn't have an answer because that's the curse of being visible. People feel entitled to define you. We canceled the shoot. Management wasn't happy, but that was the beginning of us reclaiming our image piece by piece. We started saying no more. We started writing more of our own concepts. We started showing up to meetings not just as performers, but as people with boundaries. It wasn't easy. There were arguments, sleepless nights, moments where we looked at each other and silently wondered if all of this was worth it. But every time that doubt crept in, something would happen to remind us this was bigger than us. A fan letter from a young boy in Brazil who said, "Because of you, I came out to my parents." A message from a girl in Malaysia. "I saw the way you looked at each other and realized I deserve to be loved like that too." And slowly, we realized visibility isn't just vulnerability, it's power, the kind that ripples, the kind that changes lives, even if it hurts sometimes, even if it costs something. There was a dinner with the members, just the seven of us, no cameras, no stylists, just ramen and too many side dishes. Yoongi raised his glass water because he was off alcohol again and said, "You two changed the air in this group." Taehyung, mouthful of kimchi, added, "In a good way." And Jin, always the dad, said, "You made us all braver." That night, we sat in a circle on the floor like we used to in the trainee days. And we talked not about music, not about chart numbers, about life, about regrets, about dreams, about what scared us. Jungkook talked about the fear of never being taken seriously outside of BTS. I talked about my fear of losing my identity to love. Namjoon admitted he still didn't know what happiness really looked like. And for a moment, we weren't idols. We were just boys who had grown up in the glare of a spotlight trying to piece together a life worth living. That night, I curled into Jungkook's side as the others fell asleep around us and whispered, "Promise me we'll never stop talking." He kissed the top of my head and said, "Even when we're 80. And I believed him because loving Jungkook isn't a performance. It's a practice, a daily, deliberate practice of listening, holding, staying. But love also means facing things you'd rather avoid. And for me, that thing was my family. They knew, of course, even before I told them. Mothers always do. My mom called me one morning and said, "When are you going to let me meet the boy who makes you sound softer on the phone?" And I cried because I hadn't realized I'd been waiting for her to ask. We flew to Busan a few weeks later, just the two of us. No staff, no protection, just two sons coming home. My dad was quiet at first, not cold, just reserved. But my mom, she hugged Jungkook like he was already part of the family, fed him like she'd been waiting to for years. By the end of the weekend, my father called him son. And Jungkook, who rarely cries in front of others, went to the bathroom and didn't come out for 20 minutes. When he did, his eyes were red, but he was smiling. That's what love does. It builds bridges, even across generations, even across wounds you thought would never close. And in that kitchen, over steamed rice and grilled fish, I realized something. I wasn't ashamed anymore, not of my body, not of my feelings, not of my story, and certainly not of the man beside me. Later that night, as we walked along the beach where I used to play as a child, Jungkook took my hand and said, "You make me want to grow old." And I said, "Then let's." It still catches me off guard the way certain memories wrap themselves around your ribs when you least expect it. Like the wind in spring carrying a familiar scent that makes you pause mid step. Sometimes it's the way Jungkook ties his shoelaces, double knot, then tug, always symmetrical. Sometimes it's a lyric that echoes a little too close to home. But more often than not, it's in the silence between us, the moments that stretch, not out of awkwardness, but because we've learned how to let stillness speak. We were in Jeju when I realized just how far we'd come. It was just the two of us, no crew, no plans, no pretense. The island was quiet that time of year. Wind tugging at the cliffs, ocean roaring somewhere in the distance like an old friend trying to remind us that we were small in a good way. We had rented this tiny cabin, one bed, a kitchen that barely fit two people, no internet, no signal, just wood, salt, air, and time. And maybe that was the point. That afternoon, Jungkook had fallen asleep on the porch with a book across his chest. Not a novel, some weird graphic design manual he brought along for no reason other than to scribble in the margins. I sat beside him, watched the slow rise and fall of his chest, traced the slope of his jaw with my eyes, and I thought, how did we get here? How did we survive the chaos, the headlines, the guilt, the endless calculations of what will they say if we, how did we remain soft? And the answer was right in front of me. We never stopped returning to each other. Even when the world spun too fast, even when the distance widened, even when we didn't have the right words, especially then, I reached out and touched his wrist, and like a reflex, his fingers found mine. Eyes still closed, he whispered. Thinking too loud again? I laughed, quiet, breathless. Always. He opened one eye. Come here. And I did, curled into him like I had 100 times before, fit into the space that always felt carved just for me. And we stayed like that for hours. No alarms, no expectations, just bodies breathing in tandem, like waves sinking to the moon. Later that night, we cooked dinner together, or tried to. Jungkook nearly burned the garlic. I nearly sliced my thumb open cutting onions. We ended up with half-cooked pasta and overcooked honesty. I still get scared, I said, stirring the sauce that was definitely ruined. Of what? He asked. That one day all of this will disappear, that I'll wake up and you won't be there, or worse, that you'll be there, but not with me. He didn't laugh, didn't dismiss. He took the spoon from my hand, set it aside, and pulled me into a hug that tasted like forgiveness. You don't have to earn me, he said. I'm not going anywhere. And I believed him because real love isn't loud. It's not the grand gestures or the viral moments. It's burnt garlic and holding each other in kitchens too small to dance in. It's staying even when the fear says run. Especially then, that trip was when we started talking seriously about the future. Not in vague someday terms, but real conversations. What city do we want to live in after all this? What kind of house? Do we want a dog or a cat? What do we do if the label pushes back again? What if we never get to say it out loud to the world? What if we do? And somewhere between the what ifs, a kind of clarity emerged. We didn't need the world's permission to build a life. We just needed each other's promises. And so we made them right there in that cabin in Jeju, in voices quieter than our heartbeat. I promise to choose you when it's easy and when it's not, when it's beautiful, and when it's broken. I promise to fight fair, to listen even when I don't want to stay curious about who you're becoming, to keep becoming alongside you. No rings, no candles, just us, two boys with too much history and a hunger to grow old side by side. When we got back to Seoul, reality greeted us like it always does, loud, fast, unrelenting. Rehearsals, meetings, interviews, the rhythm we knew too well, but something was different now. We weren't performing us anymore. We were living it. Namjoon noticed it first. You both seem quieter, he said one night over drinks. Good or bad? I asked. Peaceful, he replied, and that's the word that stuck. Peaceful. Not perfect, not painless, but grounded, stable, whole. The fans kept talking. Of course, theories, threads, edits that somehow piece together every glance we'd ever shared and set it to soft piano music. We didn't stop them. We didn't confirm anything either because what we had wasn't a secret. It was sacred, and sacred things don't need to be shouted. They just need to be honored. There was one moment, though, one unexpected burst of light that still makes my chest tighten. It was during a show in Manila, and of the concert, confetti falling, everyone saying their final ments. I looked out at the sea of lights, the ocean of faces, and felt my throat tighten because I wanted to say it, not just thank you, not just I love you, Army. I wanted to say he saved me. That Jungkook pulled me back from a version of myself I no longer recognized. That he loved me when I forgot how to love myself. But instead, I just said, this is the happiest I've ever been. And I turned toward him and he smiled. And that was enough because sometimes the loudest declarations don't need words, just presence. Later that night, backstage, he wrapped his arms around me and whispered, me too. And that was our vow, all over again. We never needed a spotlight. We just needed a moment. And now we had thousands. Moments we carved out in crowded green rooms, on tour buses, in between takes, moments that stitch us together not with headlines but with truth. And the truth was this: Jungkook is not my secret. He is my sanctuary. He is not my scandal. He is my softness, my stillness, my start. And every day I wake up beside him, whether in Tokyo or Jeju or a plane flying somewhere we don't even know yet. I'm reminded that love, real love, doesn't ask for perfection. It just asks for presence, and that I can give. There's a photo I keep that no one else has seen. It's not edited, it's not staged. It was taken by accident, blurry, grainy, a little tilted. But to me, it's perfect. It was in the corner of a practice room in Seoul. We had just finished rehearsing for the Festa performance. Everyone was packing up, stretching, laughing about the parts they messed up. Jungkook was sitting on the floor, drenched in sweat, his hair clinging to his forehead, and I was standing behind him with one hand on his shoulder. In the photo, I'm not smiling. I'm just looking at him, and the look in my eyes, it's everything. Not idle love, not romanticized longing, just raw, knowing, like my whole being was paused in that moment because it finally understood something my heart had known for years. He's the reason I stayed all those nights I wanted to leave. Not just BTS, life. That sounds dramatic, I know. But when your life is lived inside cameras and choreography and curated content, finding someone who sees the version of you underneath all that and still stays, that's salvation. And Jungkook, he stayed. Even when I pushed him away, even when I hid behind excuses and professionalism and we shouldn't, he stayed when I was silent, when I was scared, when I said too much or not enough. He stayed, and maybe that's why I started staying too, not just in the group, in my own skin. There was a time I couldn't look in the mirror without rehearsing criticism. Too short, too soft, too emotional, too curved in places I was taught should be hard, too tender, too needy, too much. But he never saw too much. He saw me, and through his eyes, I learned to see myself too. One morning, I remember it like a film scene burned into my mind. We were in Paris, not for work, just disappearing for a few days. Our hotel room had these massive windows with cream-colored curtains that glowed when the sun rose. I woke up before him. He was curled up, arm over his eyes, breathing heavy, and I sat on the edge of the bed, shirtless, feet on the hardwood floor, watching the light stretch across my body. For once, I didn't flinch. I didn't cover up. I just let it be. Let me be. He stirred, reached for me in his sleep, his hand grazing my lower back, pulling me gently until I lay back down beside him. I whispered, "Do you think we'll always have this?" And with his eyes still closed, he answered, "If we keep choosing it, that's what we build. Not a secret romance, not a scandal, not some forbidden love story. We built a practice of choosing each other, even in the face of uncertainty. Because love, I've learned, isn't found, it's forged in the small hours, in the tension, in the aching silence when your partner is 3 feet away but feels like a continent, in the arguments, the miscommunications, the rehearsals where you get into a fight and still have to dance in sync, the press days when you have to pretend everything is fine because the world isn't ready for what's real. Love gets forged in the fire of staying. And we stayed one night. We had a fight, a bad one. It started because I said something small, something about not wanting to be the first to show affection all the time. And his snap said I was always putting walls up, that I never trusted he loved me fully, that I only let him see the parts of me that I thought were easy to love. I said he didn't understand what it's like to be afraid of being a burden. He said I was making him feel like one. Um, I left, walked out into the soul night air in a hoodie, and sunglasses like that would protect me from being recognized or from being hurt. I walked for hours through alleys, past closed cafe, across bridges that made me think of jumping, not because I wanted to die, but because I wanted to disappear from the weight of trying to be everything. Eventually, I sat on a bench in Hangang Park and I cried silently, the kind of cry where your body shakes but no sound comes out. And then my phone vibrated. One message from him: I'll wait at the door until you come back, no matter how long. That's all it said. No guilt, no anger, just presence, just love. I went back, and there he was, sitting on the floor outside our door, hoodie pulled over his head, headphones in, probably looping some beat he'd been playing with for hours. I I stood there for a moment, watching him, my heart thudding. And when he looked up and saw me, he didn't get angry. He didn't demand explanation. He just stood up and wrapped me in the kind of hug that reminds you you're not too much to hold. And we didn't talk about the fight that night. We just held on, because sometimes healing doesn't come from words, it comes from staying. In the weeks that follow, we worked through it slowly, softly, carefully, like cleaning a wound with bare hands. We sat across from each other and talked about our fears. How I feared being loved only for what I offered. How he feared being too intense, too obsessive, too all in. And as we peeled back those layers, we found new ones: more truth, more tenderness, more reasons to stay. I started writing letters again, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to. I slipped them into his jacket pockets, hide them in his lyric notebooks, text him photos of them when we were apart. He'd respond with voice notes, sleepy, breathy, filled with "I miss you" and "You're my peace." And in those small rituals, we built a language that didn't belong to anyone else. A private country with its own rules, its own weather, its own time. And it's in that country that I've found home, not a place, a person. And in him, I found something even more unexpected. I found myself, not the version the cameras know, not the version that performs, the one that sits in the quiet of morning light and doesn't shrink from his reflection, the one who no longer hides behind laughter or rehearsed sweetness, the one who is allowed to be complex, contradictory, messy, real, and the more I love him, the more I return to me. That's what no one tells you about the kind of love that lasts. It doesn't complete you, it reveals you. And if you're lucky, it doesn't run away from what it finds. It hasn't, not once. And I haven't either, even when it's hard, even when we fall out of rhythm, even when we forget how to communicate and let our egos speak first. we always come back because coming back isn't failure, it's faith. And I'd rather return 100 times than walk away once. So here we are, still learning, still loving, still lifting the shirts of shame and letting light in, still saying yes, even on the days when yes is whispered through tears and tired bones. Still here, still choosing, still us. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't opened the door that night. If I had let the silence stretch just a little longer. If fear had been louder than love. But I did open it. And the world changed, not instantly, not dramatically, not with fireworks and applause, just slowly, like the way morning creeps in through blinds inch by inch until you realize the darkness is gone. After that, things got quieter between us, not in the way people think. We didn't stop talking. We didn't grow distant. We just stopped needing to explain ourselves so much. It's strange. The more we surrendered to the truth of us, the less we had to prove it. He started cooking more. I started reading again. We started spending entire afternoons in silence, side by side, headphones on, one of us sketching, the other writing, and nothing about it felt performative. It felt like breathing, like for the first time in years, I could exist without editing myself in real time. But that stillness is also where the ghosts live. And I had a few ghosts of shame, of what people said, of what people didn't say but implied with every glance, every pause in conversation, every question that began with, "So, what's going on between you two, really?" I never answered because even the most loving questions can feel like knives when you are still learning how to hold your own heart without trembling. There was one day it was raining in Seoul. We were holed up inside, canceled schedules due to weather, which almost never happens. Jungkook had made pancakes. I was still half asleep, and out of nowhere, I looked at him and said, "What if they never accepted?" He didn't ask who they were. He knew armies, the public, the company, the world. He placed his fork down and said, "Then I'll spend the rest of my life proving that love was never something we needed their permission for." And I swear, in that moment, I fell in love with him all over again, not because of how he said it, because he meant it. And that's the thing about him. He means things deeply, fully, without defense. And sometimes it terrifies me how someone so pure can walk through a wall this cruel and not hardened. But maybe that's why I protect him the way I do. Because he reminds me of who I was before the masks, before I learned how to survive by pleasing everyone except myself. And slowly he started bringing that boy back to life. The one who sang without worrying if the note was perfect. The one who danced in the mirror just to feel free. The one who dreamed about love without having to apologize for it. But dreams and reality don't always move at the same pace. There were there were still photos taken, still headlines whispered, still deals on the table that required us to play a part we no longer believed in. Um, I remember one meeting an advertising pitch, global brand, big check, and midway through, the exec said something like, "Of course, We'll need to keep the fan shipping narrative under control. It's cute, but let's not confuse consumers. I didn't speak, not because I couldn't, because I was afraid that I'd say something that would burn bridges. I wasn't ready to stop walking across. Jungkook squeezed my knee under the table, and that was enough. We declined the offer, and later that night, he said, I'd rather have a small life with you than a huge one where we're invisible. And I believed him. But I also knew we couldn't stay small forever, not if we wanted to keep growing. So we began talking seriously about what it meant to be seen, really seen, not just as artists, not just as a couple, but as humans, um, flawed, tender, in love. Namjoon was the first we told, really told everything, all the timelines, all the stumbles, all the moments we almost broke. He didn't say anything for a long time, just listen. Then he leaned back in his chair and said, You know, I've written lyrics about love for a decade, but I don't think I ever knew what it looked like until I saw you two off stage. And then he added, You're not just surviving it, you're living it. That night, Jungkook and I sat on the roof of our building, stars above, city humming below. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Do you think they'll always want us as a group if we don't fit the fantasy anymore? I didn't answer right away because I didn't know, because I was scared, because I was tired. But eventually I said, if they don't want the real us, then maybe they never wanted us at all. And we sat in that truth, uncomfortable, but honest. Over time, the other members started asking more, not interrogations, just curiosity. Taehyung asked if we ever thought about what it would be like if we had met before BTS. Hoseok asked what the hardest part of loving each other was. Yoongi, ever the minimalist, just said, I'm glad he makes you softer. And I realized something. We weren't just loved, we were witnessed. And that's what changed everything. Because there's a difference between people liking the idea of your relationship and people holding the weight of it with you. That's what BTS did. They held it with both hands, with full hearts, and never once asked us to shrink, not even when things got hard, especially not then. There was a moment during one of our final encore rehearsals when I stumbled on a harmony, nothing major, but it rattled me because perfection was how I survived for years. And now, standing in front of six men who had seen every version of me, the broken, the brave, the boy who once cried backstage because he thought his voice wasn't enough, I felt exposed. I looked down, ashamed, and then I heard it, Jungkook's voice, soft, steady, singing the note I missed, not to outshine me, to lift me, to remind me I wasn't alone. And the others followed one by one, filling in the chord, turning my mistake into music. That's love, not romance, not drama, harmony. That night, as the lights dimmed and the fans chanted our names, I stood backstage with tears in my eyes and whispered to myself, I'm still here, not just in the group, in my body, in my truth. And when Jungkook reached for my hand, I took it, not because I had to, because I wanted to, because the shirt I once couldn't bear to live was now a part of a story I no longer had to hide. There's a moment after the storm when the sky doesn't know whether to stay gray or turn blue. It hesitates like it's afraid of choosing the wrong thing too fast. That's how my life felt after everything settled. After the headlines softened, after the rumors turned into whispers, and the whispers turned into a quiet acceptance that what we had was real. People didn't always say it out loud, but the questions stopped. The eyes stopped scanning us every time we stood too close. The silence became less sharp, but that hesitation, that space between chaos and calm, it lingers. There were days when I still flinched, not because of Jungkook, never because of him, but because my body had learned to fear what it meant to be known. When you've spent most of your adult life being edited, packaged, sold, it's hard to trust that someone can love the parts of you that aren't pretty, the parts that aren't curated, the raw, pulsing, bleeding core. But he did. Jungkook loved me with his whole body, his whole attention, the kind of love that doesn't ask, "What can you give me?" but "Where does it still hurt?" And he stayed long enough to find out the answer. I remember a night, one of those slow, uneventful nights that somehow ends up changing you. We were laying on the couch in our shared apartment. I was tired, the kind of tired that no amount of sleep can fix. He was playing with the hem of my sleeve, quiet, thoughtful, and then he asked, "When did you stop thinking your body was yours?" It was the question I never dared to ask myself. I didn't answer right away, but eventually I said, "When it became someone else's brand." He nodded, and for a while we said nothing. Then he pulled me closer, kissed the space beneath my ear, and whispered, "You can reclaim it now. I'll wait for you to come back." And that's what he's done in every way that counts. He waited when I hesitated to undress in front of him, not because of sex, but because of shame. He waited when I pulled away during public events, not out of rejection, but fear. He waited when I said I loved him in a whisper, but couldn't say it in a room full of people yet. And in all those silences, he filled the gaps with patience, with hands that never demanded, with eyes that never judged, with presence. There was one evening, it was after a fan meeting, and we were sitting in the van, exhausted. My phone buzzed. A friend from high school had sent me an old photo, one of me at 15, all bones and oversized sweaters, standing in front of the mirror, holding my shirt up just slightly to stare at my stomach with a mix of shame and confusion. It crushed me, not because I was shocked, because I remembered exactly how I felt in that moment. Unlovable, wrong, and suddenly I was back there, not as a memory but as a fact. Tears welled up without warning. I handed Jungkook the phone. He looked at the photo, then he looked at me, and he said he deserved love too. That's all. And I broke because he didn't try to fix it. He didn't try to say, "But look at you now." He validated that even the boy I tried to bury deserved tenderness. And maybe that's what love really is. It's not just the joy, it's the grief shared gently, the past mourned together, the wounds acknowledged, not dismissed. And we've had so many of those moments. Moments that don't look like love songs, but are love nonetheless. Like the night I came home angry not at him, but the world. We had just finished a commercial shoot where the director kept calling us the visuals. Like that's all we were. I slammed the door, threw my jacket, cursed under my breath. And Jungkook, he just walked up to me, put his forehead against mine, and said, "You're allowed to be tired of pretending." And that was enough. We didn't need a solution. We needed softness. And he always gives me that, even when I don't ask, even when I don't know how to receive it. I think one of the greatest gifts he's given me is the space to be unfinished, to not always have the answers, to not always be graceful, to just be. There was a trip we took, just the two of us, to a mountain town outside Seoul. No fans, no stylists, no rehearsals, just nature, silence, breathing. And one morning, we hiked to the top of a hill overlooking a lake, the kind of view that makes you believe in God again, even if you're not sure what you believe in anymore. We sat on a rock, and I asked him, "What do you think people would say if we just got married?" He didn't even flinch. He said, "Let them talk, they'll move on." I said, "But what if they don't?" He smiled. "I won't either." It was the most reckless, beautiful answer I'd ever heard. And in that moment, I realized love isn't about finding someone who will shield you from the world. It's about finding someone who will walk through it with you, unflinching, unafraid, unmoved. That day, we didn't exchange rings, but we exchanged something else, a vow, spoken without ceremony, etched in eye contact, sealed in silence. And I've carried it with me ever since. Some days I still struggle. I see a photo of myself and feel the urge to shrink. Um, I hear a comment and want to retreat, but then I think of his voice, of how it wraps around my name like a promise, of how he still calls me Hyung in public but mine when we are alone. And I remember I am loved, not for what I perform, but for who I am when the lights go out, when the stage is empty, when I'm standing shirtless in front of a mirror, scars and all. And that love, that's the kind that heals. That's the kind that makes me brave. That's the kind I'll spend my life protecting. Because the truth is, the moment he asked me to lift my shirt, he wasn't just asking to see skin. He was asking to see me. And he did, and he stayed. And now I stay too. There's a question I've been carrying for years, a question I never dared to speak aloud. Not to Jungkook, not to the members, not even to myself. What if all of this disappears? Not just the stage, not the fans, not the fame, but us, the life we built behind the curtain, the home we stitched together with glances, with whispered apologies, with the trembling courage to touch each other even when the world wasn't watching. What if someday we wake up and forget how to be tender? What if routine replaces wonder? What if the boy who once waited outside my door all night forgets why he knocked in the first place? That fear used to keep me up at night, but not anymore. Because love Real love doesn't vanish. It transforms. It adapts. It ages with you. It breaks and rebuilds and softens until what's left is not fantasy, not infatuation, but truth. And truth is what we've come to live in. Not every day is poetic. Not every kiss feels like salvation. Some days we argue about who forgot to unplug the rice cooker. Some days he doesn't understand why I need so much silence. Some days I forget to ask him how he's really feeling, but love doesn't panic in those moments anymore. It waits. It returns. It remembers. Just last week, I came home from a photo shoot drained, the kind of drain that makes your bones feel too heavy for your own skin. He was sitting on the couch, sketchpad in hand, earbuds in. I dropped my bag, collapsed beside him, and said nothing. He didn't ask what was wrong. He didn't try to fill the silence. He just pulled my legs into his lap and started massaging my ankles. And that quiet gesture said everything. I'm here. You don't have to be bright right now. You don't have to be strong. You just have to be, and I'll meet you there. That's how we love now. Not by proving anything, but by staying close, by showing up when it's inconvenient, by choosing kindness when frustration would be easier, by practicing forgiveness before it's even asked for, and through it all, through every high, every collapse, every resurrection, the members have never left our side. Yoongi checks in on us like an old soul with unfinished karma. Still holding each other up? He'll ask, pretending he's joking. Namjoon watches from the edge of the room, his eyes always 3 layers deeper than his words. Taehyung sends playlists, songs we've never heard, each one with a title like a secret message. Jin, even in the military, still finds a way to send voice notes. You're both idiots, but you're my idiot. And Hoseok? Hoseok just hugs us without asking why. That's what family is. Not just people who know your story, but people who keep reading it even when the chapters get dark, even when the hero falters, even when the love interest forgets how to say the right thing. And BTS kept reading page after page, even when we weren't the golden boys anymore, even when the internet tried to turn us into sides, even when the love I had to give didn't fit inside the mold I was given. They never asked me to shrink. They held the space wider. And because of that, I can say this now clearly, publicly, without fear. I love Jungkook, not because he saved me, but because he saw me. Because when I didn't know how to exist in my own body, he waited until I came back home to it. Because when I was afraid to lift my shirt, he never looked away. Because when I fell, when I broke, when I disappeared into doubt, he stayed. And I know the world will always have opinions. There will always be people who think we should have hidden this forever, that we owed the fantasy more than we owed ourselves. But to those people, I say this: love isn't a betrayal of your image, it's a reclamation of your humanity. And we are not machines. We are not perfect. We are not here to be consumed endlessly without ever needing to be known. We are people. We are scared and messy and fragile and healing. And we deserve to be loved out loud. So this is me. loving him out loud. Not because it's trendy, not because it's strategic, because I want you to know that if you're sitting at home right now feeling unworthy, if you've spent years hiding parts of yourself out of fear no one could ever love you if they knew the whole story, if you've convinced yourself that your softness is a flaw, or your desire is shameful, or your truth is too much for the world to hold, I want you to hear me clearly. You are not too much. You are just too loud for a world that forgot how to listen. But someone will, someone will stay when you don't ask them to. Someone will hold your shaking hands without demanding stillness. Someone will see your scars and kiss them like scripture. That's what Jungkook did for me. And that's what I try to do for him every day, even when he forgets where he left his keys, even when his energy is too big for the room and mine is too small, even when we fall out of step and have to relearn how to walk beside each other again. Because love isn't about finding someone who fits you perfectly. It's about finding someone who's willing to practice again and again what it means to show up. And I will always show up for him because he showed up for me when I was at my smallest, when I was nothing more than a boy with trembling hands and a heart full of questions. When I stood in front of him, shirt lifted, eyes averted, bracing for rejection, and instead he whispered, "You are beautiful." He didn't flinch. He didn't tease. He didn't demand anything from me. He just stayed, and because he stayed, I learned how to stay too, in my body, in my truth, in my love. So this is the end of the story, maybe. Or maybe it's just the beginning of one we're finally brave enough to tell. There's no ring yet, no official announcement, no label approved press release with glossy photos and staged smiles. But there's a home, a quiet one, filled with music and unwashed dishes, and morning yawns, and shared books, and burnt rice, and soft hands and glances that say, "You're safe." There's love, real love, the kind that sits beside you when you're silent, the kind that doesn't need to be earned, the kind that waits. So, to the boy who waited outside my door, to the man who taught me how to lift my shirt and not flinch, to the artist who dances like the wall will never hurt him, to the lover who keeps choosing me in rooms where no one's watching, I love you. And I'm not afraid anymore. Let them say what they want. Let the storm come again. Let the headlines twist. Because we have something stronger than all of it. We have each other, we have truth. And this time, we're not hiding.